Tim Harford is an economist, broadcaster, and the best-selling author of The Undercover Economist and The Logic of Life. He joined me to talk about his work, the economics of speed dating, and why economists definitely shouldn't run the country. Tim, you seem pretty cool. How on earth did you get into economics?
Cool, okay. I got into economics by accident. I studied PPE at Oxford, which of course is the classic subject for people who have no idea what they want to do. I always thought I would be a philosopher. The philosophy tutors at my college disagreed, and I ended up being fascinated by economics. I always assumed that I would drop economics, but when I started looking at the game theory, the fact that actually this is about how people behave, this is about how people interact, I was hooked.
So what's special about the economist's way of thinking as opposed to the politicians or the philosophers?
Well, I think economists are interested in making testable predictions of human behaviour. You've got quite a strong theory about how people behave. The other thing that I think has changed recently in economics, which has made it much more interesting as a subject to write about, is that economists are getting much more interested in evidence. So you will come up with a theory about how people behave, and then you will go and test it. And you will test it in the laboratory, or you will put people in brain scanners, you will run social experiments, or you just gather together a massive amount of data from the field and see what makes people tick. And that's really changed in the last few years. Prior to that, it was all arguments about theories of how people behaved. And I think the introduction of more data and more evidence has really improved economics.
So it's really come into the real world.
Yeah, I mean, clearly economists were always interested in the real world, but when it came to applying economics the way I do to marriage or to addiction or to the organisation of cities, less traditional economic subjects, then you really need data, and data on those things has not been available until fairly recently. For a long time we've known how big the economy is, but we haven't really known who proposes dates to whom, for example.
So these are all now big social questions. Do you think economists should be the ones running the country?
No, I don't think that's a good idea at all, but hopefully people will take advice from economists. The problem is, the world's a very complicated place, and most people try to reduce the world and see it through a particular lens. And I think economists are no exception, at least in the textbooks. If you look at a traditional economics textbook, you are trying to simplify and you're trying to produce a model. And that's very powerful, but it's also risky. The way that the economy is described in an economics textbook, you could imagine, with some smart people and some clever computers and so on, you could really imagine centrally running centrally running the economy. And I think one thing that at least that economists have learned is actually that doesn't work. Doesn't matter how smart the person is in charge. Economies run themselves, and the world runs itself, and it's evolving and it's chaotic, and there are always going to be mistakes.
So the economy, one of the reasons we're told for the current financial crisis is the perverse remuneration of big bankers. And the difference between the pay at the top and the bottom is enormous. Why is that, given that somebody earning 30 million is presumably not providing 1,000 times more value than somebody on 30k? Some
corporate executives are paid bonuses that are not linked to performance, which is, at best irritating and at worst dangerous. And in this particular case, what's going on is you've got companies which have very distributed shareholders, people who own a few £100 or a few £1,000 of stock in a bank because they've invested in some mutual fund or tracker fund. They own shares in lots and lots of things. Now, if you own a few £100 of stock in a particular company, you count as a major investor, compared with most people on the street. But you've got no real incentive to try to improve corporate remuneration packages. The amount of effort that it would take you to round up all the other shareholders, to put a motion through, to complain about the way executives are paid, it's just too much effort. It's like when you go to a restaurant with 30 other people, and you know that people are going to order expensive desserts and they're going to order expensive wine, and because you're all splitting the bill, and it's in no one's interest to try to rein in on that.
So let's finish by looking at one of these examples from your book. I think you've taken a look at the economics of speed dating. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I have, and this is definitely not the most important example in the book, and it's never going to win the Nobel Prize, but it's just fun. So two economists, one of whom is now at Oxford, Michel Belot, managed to persuade the largest speed dating company in the country to hand over a bunch of data. What they found, briefly, was, first of all, every cliché is justified. So women date rich men, men don't care whether women are rich, but they want them to be slim and non-smokers. Everyone likes more educated people. Lots and lots of cliches were justified. Men propose a lot of dates, women are far more cautious when they propose dates. But they found something else, which I thought was fascinating. So romantics have a view that we have some standard, we've got some absolute standard, and unless we meet somebody who exceeds that standard, well, we won't fall in love. And the economists say, no, dating's a market. It's not a market where price tags are put on things, but it's a market with supply, with demand, with competition. And what Belot and Francesconi discovered was, yeah, it really is true. Dating is a market. People adjust their standards. If you show up at a speed date and all the men are tall, they're all rich, they're all good looking, they're all well educated, women at that speed date will not propose any more dates. They will raise their standards. They will say to themselves, sure, I want to date George Clooney. I don't want to date all the George Clooneys. And the same thing is true for men. They will also raise their standards or lower their standards, depending on, there's no nice way to put this, depending on whether they're in a buyer's market or a seller's market. So even when it comes to speed dating, people subconsciously are responding to the incentives that are given them.
That's fascinating. And that's one of the examples in The Logic of Life, which is out in paperback now, I gather?
It is in all good bookshops right now.
Excellent. Tim, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.